This is Nightly Business Report with Tyler Matheson and Sue Herrera.
Hiring rebounds. More Americans are working, and the unemployment rate is at the lowest since 2008. But there is one part of the labor market that may be cause for concern.
Get the popcorn. A new deal in the entertainment industry will create the largest movie theater chain in the world.
Perking up. Meet the former accountant who had a bright idea to supercharge your cup of coffee, and he turned it into a fast-growing business. All that and more tonight on Nightly Business Report for Friday, March 4th.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. The labor market in the United States is going strong. More Americans are working. Discouraged ones getting back in the game, and the unemployment rate remains at an 8-year low. This morning, the Labor Department said 242,000 jobs were added in February, more than what was expected. That, along with 4.9% unemployment, puts the labor market at a level considered to be full employment. But there was one big disappointment. Wage growth fell, its first monthly decline in more than a year. Hampton Pearson has the details.
Healthcare providers, retailers, and restaurants led a robust hiring surge in February. Leading economists say the strong job market should ease Wall Street concerns a recession might be on the horizon.
There's a big disconnect between the Wall Street chatter about recession and negative interest rates and all that. People's confidence in current conditions has gone up in February. It was a good month for that.
But still, the jobs report was a mixed bag. More Americans who'd been sitting on the sidelines came back into the job market last month and got hired. But wage growth decreased after a spike in January. It's the last jobs report before the Federal Reserve meets in 2 weeks.
All in all, there's something for everyone in this number, but it doesn't really change the dial for the Fed over the next 3 months or so.
In February, the jobs came from retailers, hiring nearly 55,000 new workers, with restaurants and bars adding another 40,000. Offsetting those gains, the loss of more than 140,000 jobs in the energy sector just in the last 12 months. In Washington, D.C., the business confidence has sparked a hotel construction boom. More than 24 under construction, adding another 5,000 rooms in the next 2 years. Modus Hotels is building one of the first micro-hotels here, after similar successes in New York City. Aaron Katz is Modus president and CEO.
A project like this will probably hire approximately 100 people. It'll be 40 to 50 in the hotel operation, 40 to 50 in the restaurant area.
A new concept hotel requires a new age workforce. Josh Runis is the firm's digital marketing manager and one of the new hires.
When you're looking for a job, you're interviewing a company just as much as they're interviewing you.
The challenge in the months ahead to generate enough consumer spending to create more hiring with higher wages and create a kind of virtuous economic cycle even the Fed might like. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Hampton Pearson in Washington.
For more now on the job market, let's bring in Gus Fauché. He's PNC Deputy Chief Economist. Good to see you again, Gus. Welcome back.
Thank you, Sue.
Let's start, first of all, with what Hampton mentioned, and that is the wage growth, or in this particular report anyway, the lack thereof. How worrisome is that a factor for you, if at all?
It's a little bit worrisome, but I don't think that's going to be repeated. We had a nice gain in January of 0.5%. We saw a small decline in February of 0.1%. I think we will see wage growth bounce back and be stronger through the rest of 2016.
So if you even those 2 months out, actually you do come out ahead, as Steve Leisman pointed out earlier today. But economists really across the board have been expecting, as the labor market tightens, as unemployment falls, for wage growth to kick in. Do you expect, this isn't a kick in really at all. Do you expect it to kick in?
I think it will kick in. I mean, we see the unemployment rate moving lower. We see more people quitting their jobs in search of higher paying positions elsewhere. We see businesses competing for workers. So I do think that the labor market is getting tighter, and I do think that we will see wage growth pick up. It's picked up a little bit over the past couple of years, but I think we'll see stronger growth this year and then in 2017 as well.
So where does this put the Fed? Because we've also had some pretty decent other economic reports out either this week or last week. Not all of them great, but a number of them certainly were supportive. So what does this do to the Fed's decision on rates?
Well, I think the Fed in March is going to hold steady. They're still concerned about all the turmoil we've seen in financial markets, both in the U.S. and abroad. They have some time. Inflation is still below target. But as long as we continue to get numbers like today's, and as long as we see wage growth pick up over the next few months, which I expect, then we should see an interest rate hike in June. Not too much, only 1/4 percentage point, and then see another one probably at the end of this year.
You know, any added job is a good job if you haven't had work. But I wonder, what about the quality of the jobs that are being added? Manufacturing, I believe, was actually a job decline in the most recent month. And a lot of the jobs that have been added, I would say, have been in services, restaurants, hotels, hospitality, and lower paying health care. Are they good income producing jobs?
We are seeing better job growth in terms of more middle wage jobs. So at the beginning of the recovery, there's a lot of jobs at the low end, some jobs at the high end. As the expansion has continued, we've seen broader based job growth. So industries like construction, which tends to pay pretty good wages, business, professional services, health services, financial services. So those jobs are being added now, and I think we're seeing better job growth in kind of that middle tier of jobs.
Gus, thank you so much for your perspective. Have a great weekend. Gus Fauché, Chief Deputy Economist at PNC. Ty?
On Wall Street today, the major indexes had their first 3-week win streak of the year. Woohoo! The Dow reclaimed 17,000 as investors tried to make sense of that jobs report. But by the closing bell, the blue chip Dow index rose 62 points to 17,006. Its fourth straight day of gains. NASDAQ added 9, and the S&P 500 was up 6. For the week, all of the major indexes gained 2% or more. Nice gains there. And it wasn't just stocks. Commodities had a very strong week. Crude climbed 9.5%, its best week since August. Gold up 4% for the week, its first weekly gain in 3. And copper ended the week up 7%.
To politics now, where the race for the White House is heating up, not only for the Republicans, but also the Democrats. And today, Democratic frontrunner Hillary Clinton sat down with John Harwood for an exclusive interview. Hi, John.
Hey, Sue, you know, we talked about the new element of her economic plan she raised and laid out today in Detroit. And that plan is targeting, like Donald Trump has targeted, companies that take jobs overseas. She said she would go to companies that move factories overseas and claw back the tax benefits that they'd gotten in prior years. Here's her explanation.
Oh, I don't think what I am arguing is bad for business at all. It certainly is focused on bad behavior of some businesses. And yes, when I was a senator, I had the same positions. You know, I called for reining in CEO pay. I called for closing the carried interest loophole. I called for a moratorium on mortgage foreclosures. So anybody who has followed my career knows that I support businesses that create jobs.
Let me ask about quickly about email. Your Republican opponents have openly begun to suggest that you could be prosecuted, you could go to jail as a result of this issue. When the average person out there hears there's an FBI investigation and some guy who worked for her has gotten immunity from prosecution, shouldn't they be tempted to conclude, like, well, maybe she could get prosecuted?
No, not at all. This is the same security review that has been going on since last spring. I'm happy that everybody now has been cooperating and giving information, because I think that will finally end this and show that only appropriate steps were taken. So, you know, I know that, you know, the Republicans are engaging in a lot of wishful thinking, but this is not anything people should be worried about.
Now, we went on to talk about her tax plan. The Tax Policy Center came out yesterday and said that the tax increases she's proposed would discourage savings and investment. She says she disagrees with that assessment and pointed to the growth during her husband's administration as evidence of what the nation would get if she's elected president.
Her tax plan, as I recall, John, from a segment we did last night, focuses those tax increases mostly on the highest paid people in the country, correct?
That's right. A large majority are focused on the top 0.10 of 1%, and the vast majority, over 90%, are over the top 3/4 of earners in the United States. Tax Policy Center said that 95%, the bottom 95%, would be virtually untouched. This is how she's trying to distinguish herself from Bernie Sanders, because Bernie Sanders would raise taxes on a much broader swath of the population to fund programs which are more ambitious than the one she's proposed, and that's the distinction between the two of them.
Did she weigh in at all on the Republicans and the infighting that seems to be going on right now in the party and between the candidates?
Yeah, she talked about the craziness of the Republican race, both on a personal basis and also from her perspective on a policy basis. She talked about how they're returning to trickle-down economics and pointed toward George W. Bush and the results of his last administration to say we don't want to go back there.
All right, John, thank you very much. John Harwood in Detroit for us tonight.
Well, the popular former president of Brazil was questioned by federal police there as part of an extensive corruption investigation. Protesters clashed with police on the streets of Sao Paulo while Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva was being detained by prosecutors. They say they believe Brazil's former head profited from a massive bid rigging and bribery scheme that skimmed billions from Petrobras. That's the state oil company. He has denied any wrongdoing.
Still ahead, I'll drink to that, an ancient craft that's brewing up new jobs.
To the business of beer, finally, where small brewers are showing good growth despite flat sales industry-wide. And that, in turn, is creating thousands of new jobs. There are now more than 4,000 breweries in the United States, a number not seen since the late 1800s. And the market still isn't saturated. Mary Thompson tells us where the jobs are from the Half Full Brewery in Stamford, Connecticut.
Only 3 years old, Half Full Brewery is going at full speed.
We currently brew roughly 3,000 barrels a year. We're trying to get to 15,000 barrels 5 years from now.
A goal requiring more hands, mouths, and heft.
As we go from 3,000 barrels to 5 to 7 and onward to 15, we're going to be adding roughly 2 to 3 people every step of the way.
A little bitter.
A lack of experienced workers making the steps more challenging for owner Connor Horgan, who, like others in the growing craft brew industry, wants to add seasoned workers to his current staff.
Nationally, craft brewers are opening a rate of 2 a day.
Small brewers typically make less than 6 million barrels a year. Still, they account for about 12% of the industry's volume. Volume seen growing to 20% by the year 2020, according to economist Bart Watson. And he says that will mean thousands of new jobs.
A small brewer is going to need a jack of all trades. They're going to need somebody who is both a chemical engineer and a forklift driver. Whereas as you move up to a regional craft brewer, they're going to have much more specific positions, lab technicians, that chemical engineer, a head brewer.
We'll start off with our winter lights.
Salaries will range from the mid-20s for a staff at a brew pub to 6 figures for brewery managers and master brewers. Demand for these workers behind San Diego State University's decision to offer a professional certificate in the business of craft beer.
I'm trying to get into the marketing aspect of it.
A home brewer for 5 years, 27-year-old Ashley Benson is among the more than 600 students who've taken courses hoping to make beer their bread and butter.
We get the emails saying we want to hire directly from your group because we know that they can talk about beer.
Students learn more than talk, though. Program Director Gianna Rodriguez says classes teach them how to write a business plan, get financing, and run a brewery. An ancient product giving rise to small businesses around the country, giving job seekers something to cheer about. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Mary Thompson in Stamford, Connecticut.
A rival bid for DuPont may be in the works, and that's where we begin tonight's market focus. German chemical company BASF is reportedly working with advisors about a possible counteroffer for DuPont. That's according to Bloomberg. The report goes on to say that BASF has not made a decision on whether to proceed or not. In December, DuPont agreed to merge with Dow Chemical. The news came out after the bell, and shares of DuPont initially popped on the news after closing the regular session up 2% to 63.18. Dow Chemical also rose slightly when the news hit after closing up more than 1% today to 50.29. Staples plans to close 50 more stores this year. That news comes after the office supplies retailer issued disappointing results. So much so, the company's CEO called them underwhelming. Same-store sales fell 5%, and Staples sees overall sales continuing to fall this quarter. The company also reaffirmed its commitment to acquire rival Office Depot, despite facing a lawsuit from the Federal Trade Commission. Shares of Staples fell nearly 3% to $9.60.
Winter weather and a delayed start to the tax refund season dragged down revenue at Big Lots, but earnings for the quarter still managed to top estimates. The company's CEO said comparable store sales rose for the 8th straight quarter, despite coming in below the company's forecast. Big Lots also hiking its dividend by 11% to 21 cents a share. Big Lots rose about 2.5% to $42.90. H&R Block said the trend of taxpayers filing later contributed to the company's wider than expected loss in its most recent quarter. Revenue also came in below estimates, dragged down by foreign exchange and what the CEO called a continuous fraud impact on the industry. Shares fell nearly 16% on the day, wow, to $27.76.
A box office blockbuster of a different kind. Chinese-owned AMC Entertainment is now the largest movie theater company in the world. This after acquiring Carmike cinemas for more than $1 billion. Investors like that deal, sending shares of both companies higher. Julia Borston takes a look at how this acquisition may change the entertainment industry's landscape.
The $1.1 billion deal, subject to approval by the Department of Justice, would give AMC control of about 21% of U.S. screens, replacing Regal Entertainment in the top spot nationwide.
We would think that our Carmike acquisition should close by the end of 2016. So AMC will be perfectly positioned. 600 plus theaters, 8,000 plus screens, 250 million plus guests buying tickets annually.
Analysts say that AMC, which was purchased in 2012 by China's Dalian Wanda Group, is making a smart deal, giving it valuable leverage with the movie studios.
Up until this deal, they were kind of maxed out in terms of how much leverage they had on Hollywood. But now that they're increasing their market share from 13% to 20%, now they can go back to the studios and they're a much more important player.
In addition to that new power it'll have in striking deals with Hollywood, AMC is expected to generate some saving from synergies and to benefit from new geographic diversity. Carmike's focus is on smaller markets, where different films tend to play well than in the big cities where AMC's theaters are centered. And this deal is expected to be approved by the Department of Justice because even with this acquisition, the new larger AMC would still control less than a quarter of U.S. movie screens. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Julia Borston.
Neither the major studios nor the Motion Picture Association of America commented on that deal.
Our Market Monitor guest tonight says he's investing in companies with improving businesses and attractive dividend yields. He's Mark Lucchini, Chief Investment Strategist at Janney Montgomery Scott. During his last appearance in June, he recommended Citi and Gilead, which are both down more than 20%. Those sectors have been suffering, obviously. Home construction ETF, which is off 3%. The S&P 500, meanwhile, off about 4.5% over the same period. Mark, welcome. Good to see you. Some of those financials seem to be coming back. Are you comfortable with either Citi or Gilead now?
I am in both cases, Tyler. I mean, the fact of the matter is you are right. I mean, this is a stock in the form of Citigroup that suffered along with the rest of the sector. It's pressures under net interest margins as a consequence of near zero or below interest rate policies around the world are continue to weigh on the prospects for their business. That said, the stock's been punished, I think, unduly. It's trading at 0.6% against its book value. And I still think it's a money-making enterprise that's well-run and is going to come out of this for the benefit of its shareholders. And so we'd stay along that as well as we would Gilead. It's a space healthcare that's come under fire as a consequence of the political rhetoric at the moment, but is selling for 7 times earnings, has a huge cash balance, and we think is going to be an acquirer here to stoke its R&D.
All right, let's go to the stock picks for us this time, and we start out with P&G, Procter & Gamble. You say they're turning around a really quality brand.
Well, it was one of the Dow Jones companies that really had a terrible 12 to 18 months as a consequence of a bloated portfolio of products, none of which were hitting on all cylinders. And the new management has come in. They're trying to decentralize the product management cycle as well as eliminate a lot of products that weren't core to Procter & Gamble's long-term businesses. And in the meantime, in a space, consumer staples, that is pretty richly valued, Procter & Gamble is relatively cheap, coupled with the fact that it has over a 3% dividend yield.
All right, let's go quickly to Eaton. Give me about 15 seconds on Eaton.
Great industrial franchise, once again, in a tough sector that's rebounding rather smartly in this ricochet rally that we've had, and as well another stock that has over a 3% dividend yield, and I think prospects for continued growth on the back of investors realizing that the global economy is not about to collapse.
And AT&T, you say it's a cheap valuation and they have pricing power.
Well, it's one of the few industries that's actually realizing pricing power, which is obviously good for profitability, over a 5% dividend yield and a 12 or 13 times multiple in a market that's, even after this sell-off, still trading at about 15 or 16 times forward. I think those are compelling characteristics.
Let me ask you just sort of yes or no. Is this stock market rally sustainable?
Near term, no. I think longer term, toward the end of the year, yes, most definitely.
All right, Mark, thanks. Have a great weekend, sir.
Thanks, Tyler.
Good as always to see you. Mark Lucchini with Janney Montgomery Scott. Coming up, meet the entrepreneur who had a wish, a death wish actually, and turned it into a supercharged, highly caffeinated business.
And here's a look at what to watch next week. On Monday, the markets will get their first chance to react to China's National People's Congress, the annual meeting where top officials will outline economic reform plans. On Tuesday, Chevron hosts its Analyst Day. On Thursday, the European Central Bank meets, and the markets will be looking for potential new easing measures. And that's what to watch for next week.
One rule of entrepreneurship is to listen to your customers, even if they're customers in a coffee shop asking you for the strongest cup of coffee you can make. A little bit of marketing genius never hurts either, and that's just what happened when one young entrepreneur in upstate New York got the bright idea to give his ultra-strong coffee a catchy name.
I don't know, I'm not in a rush.
Mike Brown didn't even drink coffee until he realized a caffeine rush was the only way to make it through his afternoons, working as an accountant in the New York State Comptroller's office in Albany.
I'd eat my lunch, I'd get to my desk, and I'd almost fall asleep, so it wasn't for me.
So he quit and began hanging out in coffee shops. In 2007, he bought one in Saratoga Springs. But lattes and cappuccinos proved to be a losing proposition.
I lost a lot of money. I ended up having to sell my house. I borrowed some money from my mom to meet payroll.
In his late 20s, having moved in with his mom, Brown wondered what else he could do as he tinkered with coffee blends, aiming to satisfy customers looking for the deepest, darkest cup of coffee they could find.
I came up with this really strong coffee blend, and I didn't know what to call it initially.
Brown discovered Robusta beans from India at a trade show. For decades, coffee aficionados preferred more expensive Arabica beans. But lower cost and higher caffeine content made Robusta, often used to make espresso, a blend this struggling entrepreneur couldn't resist. In 2012, he began selling online, even before he found a name. Then he saw one of those cup holders that keep drinks warm or cold.
There was a picture of a dog on it, and it said Death Wish under the dog, and I was like, wow, that'd be the perfect name for this coffee.
Until then, Mike Brown's coffee passion might have seemed like a death wish. With the right label, it's anything but.
Last year, we did about a little over $6 million in revenue.
At just under $20 for a pound, Brown's beans aren't cheap. How else to price a coffee bold enough to call itself the world's strongest? Brown says that claim is based on the flavor, though he doesn't argue with reports that a cup of Death Wish has more than double the caffeine found in a cup of Starbucks.
Congratulations.
Like, for real?
Last fall, Death Wish won Intuit's Small Business Big Game contest. Voting on social media earned Death Wish the grand prize, a free commercial during the Super Bowl, a $5 million value.
A glorious death!
In the spot, a Viking ship powers through stormy seas. A scene Brown admits might have been out of left field for some.
As the boat's, going to its demise over the waterfall, it pans out and you see this guy at his kitchen counter drinking a cup of Death Wish coffee, and he's heading out to work and he's going off into battle himself to his daily job.
During the game at an Intuit viewing party in San Francisco, Brown nervously watched his website handle 140,000 visitors at once. Sales hit a monthly record in February. Brown's staff, which numbered 6 a year ago, is now 13. And Mike says national retailers are calling, looking to stock Death Wish. Brown says it will happen, but for now, it's all online all the time.
It's not my comfort zone and it's not our business model exactly. I just need to find the right partner to move in there with.
The home of Death Wish. All right, someday in the not too distant future, we will find out which national retailer will get a shot at fulfilling its own Death Wish with Mike's Coffee. Mike Brown says he's confident his supply chain can handle the sudden ramp up that deal will require. You saw him roasting coffee beans at their warehouse, but they're also talking to some of the biggest roasters in New York State. An interesting, good story. Good for him.
Great story.
Good for him.
Yeah, absolutely. Continued good luck.
Yeah.
Super Bowl ad. All right. That does it for Nightly Business Report for tonight. I'm Sue Herrera. Thanks for joining us.
And for me as well. I'm Tyler Mathisen. Have a great weekend, everybody, and we'll see you on Monday.